And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Rack. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Andrew and JC from SasqWatchers Podcast. We've been talking back and forth for a long time and finally got a chance to sit down and record an episode. But before we bring them on, if you've ever had an experience or story you'd like to share, please reach out to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. We'll get you scheduled for a future episode. You can also go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. That'll get your message directed to me as well. Either way works, so just do what you got to do. We'll get something set up for a future episode. If you'd like to help the podcast to continue to grow, please continue to share it. The word of mouth is what helps the podcast continue to find new listeners, potential new guests to come on here and share their experiences. I appreciate all of you that continues to share it around. Word of mouth is definitely the best way of helping this to continue to grow. You can also leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts at. And if you write out one, specifically like on Apple, I will read it and give you guys a shout out. The 5-star reviews helps with the ranking, so if that's what you want to do to help out, it's definitely appreciated too. If you'd like to join the Patreon, you get early access to all the new episodes once they're recorded, plus they're all ad-free. And there will be some bonus content on there too. It's worth checking out. It's only $1.99 a month. Make sure to follow us on all the social medias. But I think now we're going to go ahead and bring Andrew and JC on. I'm definitely looking forward to talking with these guys. Seem like some pretty cool guys. Hope you guys enjoy the episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take the time to welcome my guests tonight, Andrew and JC. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Not a problem. Glad you guys could both make it on here tonight. Kind of had to do a little bit of shuffling around and got to work out. I usually don't record on weekends, but made an exception.
Yeah,
Wow, we're special.
Super appreciate it. The week that I had was totally chaotic.
Yeah, I do see that amateur Andrew over here couldn't figure out his background, so
it's funny because with this being green, if I change my background, it covers me up too. I've tried that before because my wall itself is actually green, but then I put the pictures on it. So obviously you only see bits and pieces of green, but I had painted the whole wall like this bright green color to be like a green screen. And I noticed like with the green lights and everything, it was covering me up too. Like you could see like a reflection of my face here and there. It's kind of creepy looking.
Yeah, that's what I ran
I don't
into.
want to see that.
So
sounds cool.
But yeah, you guys want to give a little information about yourselves to the listeners?
Yeah, let Andrew go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Andrew or Drew. I started SasqWatchers Paranormal Podcast last year around September. It was birthed by a desire to film a documentary about Art Bell that fell through after talking to some of his family members and Premier Audio, the owners of his audio. And I was still really feeling, some type of drive to get this project moving. So it kind of just evolved into the podcast, and the name SasqWatchers has been in my head forever. And, I just called some friends up, and then we made a couple of attempts to get it rolling. And after a couple of weeks, we settled with JC over there as the co-host. And the
Infamous episode 3.
Yes, the rest is kind of history. We have a missing episode that's lost into the files because of some of the other guys that we tried to work with saying
Shenanigans,
really crazy things. But that didn't slow us down. And it's just been a lot of fun, and I've been trying to be as dedicated as possible to it. I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks into the podcast, I had really major neck surgery. I basically had my entire neck reconstructed, and the day I got out of the hospital, I came home and we recorded an episode. So I didn't get behind or anything on it. And anybody, if you're familiar with us, like you know the dynamic, and I really like to express my gratitude for JC because I come up with SasqWatchers? Yes, but if you go back and you listen to that first episode, that was just me, and compare it to just even a couple of weeks after when I finally had JC. I mean, it's evolved so much, and it's all from our partnership, so I give him a lot of credit.
Man, I had to keep him in check for a while. This is the first time we've been on another podcast together, so I'm going to just rip him apart on here. Andrew is a fountain of ideas. Like, this guy comes up with ideas, very good ideas, and then very maybe not so good ideas as well. And he's super dedicated and like insane. Like he gets like OCD about these episodes to the point where like he literally comes home from the hospital and he's like, we gotta do episodes right now. Dude's popping pills and we're doing episodes, and he's got a neck brace on. He's trying to cover it up with like this zip up half mock turtleneck thing. We're talking to a priest and he's sitting there with like this on this episode. Like, he's got his neck in a Pringles can, and just different things. Like I'm the check and balance, I think. Like when it comes to just some of like the artwork, some of the ideas and stuff, I've always popped in. I'd be like, Drew, we can do better than this, man. Like, I know you can do better than this. And then he fixes it, changes it, and next thing you know, we have a better product.
Yeah, I will say that he does do that. And one thing that hurt, like, if you want to get deep, you want to go Jerry Springer style, or Maury even. One thing that hurt was my original idea was to kind of do a parody of the Mystery Machine for SasqWatchers, and I loved it. Like, one of our stickers is the Mystery Machine that I made, and he crushed my feelings every single time. And he's like, I think we could do better than the Mystery Machine. So I would go in and edit and try to make the Mystery Machine parody that much better, and I would love it. And he kind of moved me away from that. And ultimately what it did was it gave us what I think is not just an iconic logo for us, but I mean, I'll throw it out there. I'll drop the gauntlet that I think our logo is probably top 3 of all podcast logos that's ever existed.
Wow.
And that's only because he told me that we shouldn't do Scooby-Doo stuff.
It's a pretty good logo. Like, people will say that they checked out our show just because of the logo, and it totally beats some dumbass Scooby-Doo generic mystery van. Nothing against Scooby-Doo, just for the record.
I'll put this out there that I was hit up by another podcast recently called Mystery Inc. And
no,
their logo and stuff is very Scooby-Doo van related. So probably a good idea you went with something different, because I think there's several podcasts that do that. So you've got more of an original feeling going on for you right now.
And it's evolved since then too, right? Right, Drew? So it's not just this one logo. We have like this merch store that's just overflowing with like all these different merch ideas and stuff. And I end up as like the beta tester for all this merch. I'm disappointed I didn't wear the one shirt tonight. I should have wore that. I might go change halfway through the show. But
I
mean,
ordered.
if
As I say, I ordered a Sasquatch design that I had for my stuff, and the shirt came crooked. The print on it, the print on it is straight up crooked. So I'm pissed off by it.
Should we talk about the parapossums?
Okay, we won't get super into detail. We could get more into detail off the air.
I'll drop names.
We came up with this idea kind of based off of a term from the pro wrestling scene. We grew up like wrestling fans.
No, I'm a huge wrestling fan. I still watch.
Awesome.
And
Same.
when I was 28, I went and he drove me to do a tryout, and I became a wrestler for a bit, and that's the beginning of my terrible neck problems. But we were trying to come up with like a fan term, and we came up with parapossum.
Now hold on. It's not just fans. Like, come on, we got to be honest here. I don't know who's going to hear this podcast, but
we
Drew
have
has
some obsessed, like we get some obsessed fans that kind of.
We have this uncanny ability to draw in like random women off of the internet, like people, like paranormal women that like stalk. Well, stalk might be too hard of a term, but that like you can tell are clearly like interested in meeting up for whatever reason and stuff like that, like beyond just talking about paranormal stuff. So that's where we got the term parapossum from. And we made this t-shirt. Drew made this awesome design with like this screaming possum like jumping out of a tree down at you. So we put this up on the store, and I'm like, I'm going to order one, because I thought the whole thing was it's the funniest thing in the world, because it's a play on ring rats, like Drew said, with like the wrestling scene. So I get this t-shirt and it's so zoomed in, and it just says POS, piece of shit, on it. And I'm like, well, this fits me perfectly now. It's even better. So I didn't return it or even get my money back. It's a first run. We're keeping it. So maybe someday we'll like give it away or something. I don't know.
but one thing that worries me is if, anybody else tries to buy that shirt, are they going to get that flawed shirt because he didn't try to get his money back for it? And
That's true.
then end up with the same garbage design. But yeah, I have just a deep interest in graphic design and whatnot. So we have overflowing merchandise, even though JC's basically the only one that orders it, because there was just a long stretch of time where I was like, this is really fun. I'm going to just design 1,000 shirts and put them up. And yeah, he just showed you the Christmas tree ornament that I put out.
Gave it to my family for Christmas.
That's the stickers
nice.
I had, babe.
Yeah.
They came out pretty decent.
Yeah.
All AI.
It's wonderful.
I won't tell people ask me how I make them, like how I make the AI make certain things like that. I was like, it's all about how you figure out how to make the prompts. Like
it is. And sometimes it takes like multiple iterations.
Yeah. It's not a straightforward through thing, but that's the thing. Like the original design, put like a Sasquatch in that one between the legs. And then I went into Photoshop and like Adobe Express, and you can highlight areas and say blend with this, and like you can change certain things. So it even has like an AI thing on there. Everything's going to where you can describe which one. So I said change the trees in the background, like silhouettes of trees. So between its legs now it looks more like forest instead of a random Sasquatch in between its legs. But
right, I'm still using CS7 from like 2003. So
to be 100% honest, I think that's the one I had on my computer.
It's such a good version. That was like the best version.
Mine, I think, was
still had it.
I have
mine was from
CD.
2006. Yeah, I had the CD too, and then I had the authorization code, and it came from a local screen printing company. They don't know I had a copy of it.
The best thing about those older versions with the codes is that like you can just run a random code generator now for them, and they work because they're not selling the licenses anymore. So any code you put in there will work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anymore I don't even try and mess with stuff. It's just, to be honest, I've actually used the Paint 3D that comes on stock on your computer, you can actually highlight certain things and then you can remove things and blend it in the background and stuff like that. They've made it a normal MS Paint is now a little bit more high tech than what it used to be.
Oh, I like Pixlr.com. I think they have a good online editor. Shout out to Pixlr.
We'll take that check any moment.
Try to get you some sponsors here, I see.
Right. Not sponsored.
I've often wondered if I would actually, if someone ever sent me something and wanted me to sell their product, I'd be like, I don't do this for money. I know seems like that's a strange thing for podcasters or whatever, but I do this because I enjoy doing it. And I was really hesitant to ever monetize. Like for me, it's just, I'm spending like 80 something dollars a month now just to run this podcast. So whatever I make back is basically just covering the costs that I'm paying out of pocket to do this podcast for. And
yeah,
if someone come to offer me money to talk about a product or whatever, if it's not something that I'm actually interested in, I'm not going to do it just because I don't care about your money. Now, I guess if they offer me a shitload of money, then I might have to sell out. I don't know, but
everybody's got a price, right?
Yeah.
Ted DiBiase, $1 Million Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a really good point. And I think a lot of people who are outside of the bubble, like really don't understand the amount of just free labor that goes into this and how it's basically a second job and a huge portion of your life that financially you're not really ever, unless you're like a gigantic show, going to get that kind of return on. And it's a labor of love. And like he said, I get crazy OCD about every single idea that I have. It keeps me awake at night. He'll get a text from me, at midnight and then 2 a.m. and then 5 a.m. And then the next day he's like, did you sleep at all? And it's worth it if you love it. And that's something that even if you do love it and do it for free, you get returns in other ways. If I didn't have this show, I wouldn't have met so many cool people, even in a short period of time. And JC and I have this little inner circle that we're in with some other podcasters and people who have channels on YouTube that have legitimately become my absolute best friends. Like I would call them like brothers, and 6 months ago, they're complete strangers. We have no idea who each other are. And if, I don't start a podcast and send an email to these guys about, doing some type of show collaboration or coming on and being interviewed by us, that doesn't happen. And so you can take that payment in a lot of other ways. And it's just a really gratifying thing to know that even in some small way, our show has affected people's lives. And I'm not trying to be conceited with that, but just the friendships that we've made have all stemmed from us being podcasters who do it for love. And so
I think that's a good point. Like it did personally impact lives recently, right? Like the outpouring of support from the community that we saw recently was absolutely insane. Not just from the people we knew, but from random people. We love Matt Empsch, Planet 412, Rye Voss on Lost Freak. Well, sorry, Codex of Curiosities. We do a Tuesday live with them every week, and I look forward to it every single week. It's one of my favorite things. It's what I have. I mean, it's right up there with doing the episodes with Drew. Like, it's just fun, all of us being on there, just talking about random topics. Usually we go about an hour and a half. We went way over. We were like 3.5 hours this last one, but we had Josh Turner on. And that was an interesting ride. It was, as always. So the people that we've met, it's crazy how many people live in like my backyard too, right? Like being in Northeast Ohio, all of a sudden, like I'm finding all these people that are within like an hour and a half of me that I had no idea even existed before.
And that's kind of what happened with me and Eric from Uncomfortable. He only lives about an hour north of me. And he has a pretty decent sized podcast. So him and I have collaborated a few times. And he was just on my live stream last week. I'm doing like a monthly live stream, but I don't want to do the whole weekly. I record 2 or 3 interviews a week and then trying to work full time and everything else. And I have baseball coming up for the kids. I'm going to help coach. There's just so much stuff going on that I can't do a live stream every week.
And those are the things that people don't understand that you're missing out on in your life when we do these things. And we, for a long time, were doing 2-3 recordings a week. We still have some of those scheduled, but that's how hard we were hitting it for months and months and months. And
again, because Drew's a psycho.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take all of the responsibility for that, but also the credit for it too, because there's not. I would wager that if any other podcast was started in late September, they probably don't have 40 episodes yet. And we have our 40th next week, and we're on track to have our 50th recorded within 2 weeks, I think. It's just that OCD that I have and the love that I have for it. And most of us podcasters, we have our full-time jobs, and something that seems to work in my favor for now, at least, is that I work at a college. So I'm actually on spring break right now. So tomorrow is like my first actual day off on spring break. And then we go back to work for a little while, and then we have Easter break. And then after that, in May, I'm off for the summer. So I have this ability to focus a little more on some of these things that some other people might have trouble juggling back and forth. So over the summer, when baseball starts and I'm helping assistant coach and soccer and all that other stuff, that's just going to be the daytime stuff. But I'll still be up till 5 o'clock in the morning talking about ghosts and UFOs and
texting me while I'm sleeping.
Crazy stuff.
And then he'll be like, "Hey, did you get this?" Like, yeah, I got it at 4:30 when you sent it, Drew.
So what made you, of all things, why did you pick this type of niche, whatever they pronounce that word as, for the podcast? Like, what drove you to want to do into like SasqWatchers?
Well, it's a number of things. It's kind of a potluck of encounters and experiences throughout my entire life. People that were around me having experiences, and I, like a lot of people our age, one night when I was in middle school, staying up all night playing video games, scrolling through the radio, I found Coast to Coast AM and fell in love with the talk radio side of this that eventually became what we do here. I can remember being super young, and my one grandmother's house was, I will say, supposedly or allegedly super haunted, because I was so young that it's hard for me to kind of remember any real experiences there. I had some interesting events that I look back on and question whether or not they actually happened because I was so young. But she used to have her house lined with what they called at the time ghost candles that would light up if a presence was around. Like they would like self-ignite, and it was some type of, I don't know if it was witchcraft or whatever, or some type of candles that were supposed to assure us that there's no presence here, and if there is, this candle will light. And so there's a level of crazy that has always surrounded me. And in that house, I never saw those candles light up, but I remember, tons of uneasy experiences. And there was an orb experience that I had. And it took until I was an adult to really understand that I had seen an orb floating around the house, because in my memory, I can remember I have, I'm in a room. I have 3 or 4 cousins with me. our family was very much an example of it takes a village. So, growing up, literally up into my 20s, it would be more uncommon for us to be in a house and not be surrounded by cousins and aunts and uncles. And we're in this room, and I can just remember at the time thinking that it kind of looked like the Magic School Bus when it would get small and then drive around. And so this little thing that I envision as the Magic School Bus is like literally just kind of floating in this room, and I'm the only one that notices it. And then I follow it out into the hallway, and from there my memory gets really fuzzy about it. I followed it into another room, and then that's it. I don't know what happened after that. That's probably my earliest memory of something really strange happening. And so yeah, just my whole life I've just kind of had these strange things. I'm plagued by sleep paralysis, and I know that that's a scientific debate, but because I've spent my entire life with these terrible events of sleep paralysis, I've also spent a lot of time as an adult researching. And when I was in college, my psych papers were all about it, so I could try to understand it. Or if I could get an English paper in, as a sleep paralysis study, I would do that too. And that my UFO experience is something that I always talk about, and he's so tired of hearing it. But that happened in, I think, 2017 at this point. It's been a few years, and it actually happened in this town that I live in now, and I didn't live here before. And I was at a party at this house that I live in, and I was technically at work. I was a caregiver, and the person that I was looking after was over here for it. Was happened on the 4th of July. And for the longest time, people kind of wrote the event off because it happened on the 4th of July. And so we were walking back to his house, and just kind of out of the corner of my eye, I see this light kind of real slowly come up. So I'm thinking this is like one of those Chinese lantern fireworks or something. And I'm like, dude, check it out. There's fireworks. So we stop and we pay really close attention to this thing because, we want to watch these fireworks before we go back up and finish the night off. And it just stops, and it just hangs there. And it's just like this bright orb, and it's over the tree line, and it just doesn't ever explode. It doesn't ignite. It just stays like that. And while we're watching it, waiting for the, like the combustion, it then divides itself into 3 total orbs. And then they started to kind of cascade around the sky. And, I always say that it kind of reminded me of almost kind of like a sky ballet or something. It seemed so calculated what they were doing. And it went on for 20 minutes. We were there in awe. And my biggest regret, and maybe my entire life, is that while it's happening, I was snapping it, and I was sending snaps to a friend of mine that's super into paranormal stuff, and instead of actually recording it on the phone. So I had all of these videos from on Snapchat that I just don't have anymore, because after, I don't know if it ever changed or they give you access to something, but at the time, after 24 hours, those would disappear. And so I had all of this video evidence that I was snapping away and just didn't get to keep. And so while this stuff's going on, we head back further up just a couple of blocks to where the house was at that he lived at. And when we got there, I had a coworker and he had a roommate that were inside of the house. And I ran inside and was like, hey, this is crazy, but what kind of phone do you have? Because at the time I had an old iPhone 5, and I knew that it wasn't going to take as good a video or whatever if somebody had the newer models. And I was like, there's something crazy out there happening in the sky. And my coworker looks at the roommate and she goes, it's back. they had seen it too earlier in the night in a different location. And they come out, and the four of us stand there, and we're just watching these things go about the sky. And I would say that it happened for a total of about 45 minutes. And then they came back into one, and then it just shot off into like wherever. It just almost was a blur in the sky and then was gone. And something that I always like to talk about with this experience was that, like, the guy that I was looking after was scared. He's terrified. If I bring it up to this day, because we've remained friends, even though that I've long left that field of work, he has rationalized and convinced himself that, you know, what we saw wasn't anything crazy. On the other hand, when we were experiencing this, I kind of felt like we were meant to see it. I had this immediate feeling of like euphoria. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I felt like I was drawn to it. And over the years of research and doing this podcast and learning about mind speak and things of that nature, I'm now questioning if something like that occurred. That, you know, I don't know why I decided at that moment to look and notice that this was going on. You know, I felt like I was drawn to it. So perhaps I was called upon and they wanted me to see it. And considering I had that like euphoric experience with it, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it came specifically for me. And, you know, I got off of work at around midnight that night, and I jumped in my car and I drove exactly to that location where it would have occurred at. And I drove around and I tried to experience it again. That's how happy that it made me to have encountered it. And unfortunately I didn't. And, you know, I've had a couple of similar things throughout the years since, but never anything as in depth, you know, nothing that I could really say wasn't something else, you know, maybe perhaps a shooting star or whatever that caught my eye. And now I'm so dedicated to seeing this again that I almost have that confirmation bias where I try to convince myself that what I'm seeing up there is that again. But not to ramble on and on about it, but I reached out to MUFON, and it was investigated. There were no drones in the area at the time. That's when they started having, you know, license required for drones. So there were no licensed drones in the area. There were no publicly discussed aircraft from the military in the area. There was every single box that we could check for what this could be had been checked. And MUFON was pretty satisfied keeping it classified as unidentified. And when we started this podcast, I had Preston Dennett on, and he was our second guest. And he kind of told me that there's actually a lot of UFO encounters and experiences on the 4th of July. And that was not just something that happened to me. And I shouldn't allow people to write it off as being some 4th of July thing, because it's actually something that happens a lot. And another thing is, somebody had suggested that it was spotlights. And I live in a very small town. We have less than 1,200 people scattered throughout the entire area, and none of them have high grade equipment like that, and giant movie theater spotlights in their backyard.
The Sheet's debut opening.
Yeah. I have to drive quite a ways just to get to a he called it a Sheet's, for anybody that doesn't know, in the area that we live in. That's kind of like our Wawa or something, you know, just a giant convenience store gas station kind of thing. But yeah, so that experience has been something that, you know, has stayed with me in a very positive way. And it was therapeutic to have somebody come onto my show and talk about it. And I know Preston does a lot of press and he talks on a lot of shows, but I am to this day forever grateful that he decided to come on to this new show that had only one other episode with an interview prior and gave us a shot, and I was able to have that discussion with him because it was very validating.
What
I'm
color?
done.
What color did you say it was?
It was kind of white and yellowish, almost kind of picture it like a headlight of a car that you're looking at, after if they're high beaming you. It didn't have a lot of actual hue or color tone to it, so it was just kind of orbish in that sense.
I don't know. I think I mentioned it maybe on the episode that I did with the lost frequencies, but we had seen something recently in our backfield, basically behind our house. There was an orange glowing orb, and you mentioned it looked like one of those Chinese lanterns. I kind of thought that's what this thing was, or a flare, because of the way it was burning. It was almost like an orangey color, and it looked like a fireball. And it was stationary for a while. And then I had my wife and my son come look at it. For whatever reason, I did not think to even get out my phone and record. I had my phone in my pocket. I never thought about it. And I've been an ass and made comments like people see things. Well, everyone has a phone, well, they just record it. And I did the same thing that I criticized for people doing because I didn't even think about it. But we were watching it for about 5 minutes, and this thing, it moves up. You can see it move up, and then it just disappears. So if it was a flare, I figured it would come down and go up. So I've always wondered, is like, well, maybe someone put a lantern out, but again, I can't say just instantly just disappearing. And that was
Right.
That was just back in November.
Yeah, that's something that I've found is there are other people who have experienced this type of UFO, and that again, the validation to receive in that regard, it's incredible. It's one of the things that I've learned doing this show, even from really good friends of mine, that the public opinion can really sway the way people talk about this stuff or even address it at all. And I've just kind of always been lucky not to have that brain chemistry that I really don't care what people think of me, or if they're going to look down on me because I knew 100% know that I saw a UFO, and they're going to think I'm nuts and make fun of me. I mean, whatever, like that's fine, but that doesn't frighten me from talking about it. And it's just it's sad, but it doesn't surprise me that
It's
so
the
many
stigma
people,
that comes with it.
yeah, that are actually not built like I am in that regard, and that public opinion can really sway somebody from even talking about something that happened to them. So
I didn't talk about what happened with me for 15 years because of that reason alone. Basically, because of the job that I was doing, I didn't want people to think that the job that I'm in charge of or whatever, oh, this guy's a freaking lunatic because he sees weird stuff.
yeah, it's just, again, I don't have like a super professional job. When I'm not doing this, I'm a chef, and it's pretty Wild West, even where I'm at now in a college. So we're kind of blessed in that regard. Like, we don't get paid very well, but the things that can come out of our mouths would get just about anybody else fired in a different profession. So
Yeah, I'm in the construction field, but I oversee multi-million-dollar construction projects. So I feel like
yeah,
I feel like with me and the clients or whatever, once they figure out, oh, it's that guy, he's running my job. I don't know about him. He sees weird things.
yeah,
It's funny because I advertise the podcast. So on the back of my truck, when I go out on the job site or whatever, it's got Tinfoil Tales on there. And I've had workers come up and ask me about it. And I can give them like little QR codes to scan, and they listen to the podcast. And then like, hey, my wife really likes your podcast, man. I was like, cool, thanks.
yeah. And that's another thing that I've learned is you kind of have that fear at the beginning about that public opinion, and then pretty much everybody's into it. Everybody I think secretly has some type of paranormal thing, even if somebody will argue with you that, you know, this stuff doesn't exist and there's no such thing as ghosts and this is silly and there's absolutely no such thing as Bigfoot. Like, they're convincing themselves in that argument. I think most people just secretly, when they walk away from that conversation, remember that time that they were scared because they saw something that they didn't understand.
I
And
kind of remain skeptical on a lot of things just because I feel like you have to. In order to keep a level head about everything, I don't take everything for fact. I always try and look for rational explanations before I jump off into supernatural, paranormal, cryptid, whatever. Just because, and I'm not trying to discredit anyone, but people do misidentify things. People get confused about things, and some people are just straight up bullshitting, which I don't know what the purpose of that is, but it comes with the territory. But I feel like a lot of the people that I interview, they believe 100% what they're telling me. And who am I to say what they're telling me isn't true? Like, I'm not there. I don't know what they experience. I'm not here to prove or disprove anybody. So,
yeah, that's an important aspect about this too, is kind of knowing what to look for. And honestly, I have been lucky. I think, I don't know if JC would disagree, but the people that we've had, at least in our short run, have all seemed incredibly genuine. And I don't think that we've ran into any, like, you know, BSers. We'll have somebody on and we have like this weird synchronicity that just has jumped from each show, you know, where somebody will mention something that a previous guest had, you know, maybe touched on in some way, and that's just built every single week. And so it's kind of wild that we've had this continuity, I guess, that's just been built from the beginning and just continues to occur, even if the two people are talking about something completely just 100% different from one another. A psychic said one thing that a Bigfoot episode or something might then touch on 2 weeks later. So, and again, there's definitely confirmation bias where I'm seeing something that isn't there because of the nature of what I'm doing. But do you think that we've had any people who are disingenuous in any way?
I don't think we've had anyone on that was disingenuous in any way, although since we talked about a certain group, I will bring up my criticality point in that psychics, for me, I've seen zero evidence of any kind of psychic powers or abilities, and I'm not calling anyone out specifically. And I think one time on an episode I had a challenge out. I said, somebody come on and prove me wrong, like show me that this is real and not just like happenstance and like confirmation bias, like Drew was saying. Like, there's ways that people can say and manipulate that make you believe that they have these abilities, and they aren't true now. But I don't think anyone that we've had on has been disingenuous, no. But that's just my sticking point. Like, come at me if you want, but for me it's psychics. Like, some people it's Bigfoot, like you said. Like, there's absolutely, we have no evidence of Bigfoot, like where's the body, kind of thing. That's how it is for me with psychics. Like, the government, with all of the things that our government should not be trusted for, have done experiments with psychic abilities. Psychic abilities have been tested by independent labs, and I've just seen nothing that proves that there's anything remotely close to a psychic.
I interviewed a psychic recently. It was back in the fall, and I don't know. Pretty sure I even said on the episode that I'm skeptical on psychics and mediums and everything like that. I'm not saying it's not true. I myself, and even hypnotists, I've interviewed a couple hypnotists. I am leery when it comes to stuff like that because I hear these commercials of people that get hypnotized and automatically you're going to lose weight or you quit smoking just because you listen to this guy talk to you in a group setting and he does some weird power psychic hypnotism or something and it makes you stop smoking instantly. I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. If that's the truth, you can control the entire world with that kind of a power. So it's like,
Yeah.
and then people, a lot of psychics you see, they ask questions and it's almost like they're fishing around for like an answer. And once they get an answer, they kind of start picking in this where, oh, you knew this person. I actually had someone come up to me at an event a couple of years ago and they told me they were a psychic and I said, oh, okay. And they're going to give me a reading. The reading was way off because I didn't give them anything to go by and I have resting bitch face constantly. So it looks like I'm always mad. So they thought they were annoying me. I was like, no, just listening to you try and figure me out. She never did.
Yeah. Cold readers, I think, give the field a bad name. I'm not sitting here saying that I disagree with JC, but it's one of those aspects of I want to believe. There are fringes of psychic abilities that I have a deep interest in. Of course, the man, I lost the word. When they try to find missing persons, and I'm always kind of intrigued by somebody, just sitting down, closing their eyes, and focusing on a coordinate and being able to, maybe find a missing person or whatever. And those types of psychics, I at least want to hear out and talk to. I've tried to have psychics on the show, and it's funny is pretty much every person that we've had either bail, no show, or reschedule has been a psychic, and 100% of them. And
that's because they have the knowledge beforehand that I'm going to question them.
Okay,
right?
But that makes sense. I was going to say, like, the one group of people that should have that foresight and wherewithal to know, like, oh, I have an appointment coming up, are the ones that, I mean, they won't even respond to the messages that we send to see if they're still, available to come on or if they need to reschedule. And every single one of them, we've had one actually show up. So
it used to be the alien abduction people for me, but now it's become more of the cryptid eyewitnesses. I've had several different people that have saw Bigfoot or something, and they schedule their interviews, and then time for the interview, I reach out to the people ahead of time. They ghost me. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, why do you sit here and send me a whole bunch of crap? Like, send me these messages, talk to me for a little while. Want to do the interview? I email you the link. You're all about it, and then all of a sudden you just disappear. But then I see you making posts the day of the thing, and then I remind you. I almost comment on one guy's thing. He was commenting during the time that we should have been interviewing. He was leaving posts on his Bigfoot group. And he was like talking to people on there, and I was going to comment under what he had said. I'm like, so how about that interview? I just left it alone. I was like, it's not worth
it. Yeah.
See, I got that petty energy. I'd do something like that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's okay. Everybody's always really blown away by my personality when we're not recording, because I've managed to kind of hold that stuff back. But when you stop pressing record in a situation like that, I turn into the pettiest keyboard warrior mean girl. Like, I'm ready to, we'll just end it all. We'll just get canceled right now because I'm ready to fight with this person. But for whatever reason, I'm able to put on this journalism face when we do these shows, and people are always kind of blown away when they see my sense of humor or how I act in other fashion. And yeah, so sometimes it's hard, but just try to always be as professional as possible. And it's not like I'm paying anybody to be on the show. So if you got to bail, you got to bail. But yeah, it's funny that it's always a psychic, and then they either don't respond or don't even open the message. And that's fine. But I do really care about offering, I hate the term platform, but I'm offering that platform for you to talk about this stuff. Like, I'm super influenced by Coast to Coast, and Coast to Coast would never take somebody away from that platform just because they were a psychic or something.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, over the years, they've gone the other direction of kind of gallivanting silliness, but I'm all for it. But as far as what you said with the cryptid experiencers kind of ghosting you, I'm starting to run into that problem now with our documentary that we're filming. And I guess so the backstory to that is we filmed a documentary in January. It was sandwiched in between the two big snowstorms that were hitting the Northeast at the time. And so this terrible snowstorm that hit, and we had literally feet of snow where I lived, came, and then I jumped in my car and I drove to Ohio to film with him. And we filmed and we wrapped, we did our investigation, and I jumped in my car and I came all the way back to PA with a storm chasing me from behind. And that was about the Melon heads. And that was really cool. It launched what I'm calling SasqWatchers Film Division. And that's something that if we could definitely talk about. But right now I'm working on the follow-up to that is about rakes and pale crawlers. And I've made a couple of really, really good contacts, but I'm finding that a lot of people are kind of trolling me about it. And even somebody that I thought was a solid lead, I talked to him many times and I was like, okay, I might actually drive 2 hours to this guy's house and put him in the film. And then I start seeing him pop up in other groups and where he's clearly trolling.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really disheartening.
The
to
whole
see
thing, like with rakes, I actually saw this today on Reddit. The rake is supposed to be a creepypasta. And I've tried to say that they're basically a pale crawler, and people were arguing on there that they're not. Basically, a pale crawler has been around for a long time, and the rakes were depicted differently, but now people are associating them with them, and they're not the same thing. My opinion about pale crawlers also stems back to other cryptids. You have your Dover demon, same kind of thing. You have your things around the caves. Even the Kentucky goblins, to an extent, could have been labeled as a crawler. And you see all these strange little humanoids, and they all seem to be somewhere within a cave area, like with mountains or something where there could be possibly underground caves. And then you have the movie The Descent. So I'm always just kind of like, well, maybe these movies that depict these weird things growing in these caves and these humanoid creatures in these caves, maybe that's Hollywood's way of saying, hey, this is kind of true, but we're not going to come out and say it's true, but here's the inspiration for the movie.
Yeah. And I went out and I started filming some principal stuff last Saturday before I had my terrible events of this week. And that is something that I'm starting to question too. I go out and I'm in the bush, I'm in the woods, and I'm with somebody who is a witness that I trust 100%, every single word that he said, because I've known him for a couple of years. And despite being one of my best friends, he refuses to be heard or acknowledged. And sorry, my son is, I think, sleepwalking right now. Just walked by it twice. I have to John Doe him because he doesn't want his story to be put with his actual face. He's afraid of losing his job over it. And so we're out there in the woods and we're he's showing me all of these areas, and we get to talking about, what this creature could be, and are we manifesting it? And then that kind of gets into this philosophical question about what is manifestation, and is it even possible, or is this an actual cave creature that is coming out from these hidden rock formations that we photographed and took a bunch of video evidence of over the weekend. And it's just, there's For me, there's so many actual sightings that I kind of allow myself to separate it from the creepypastas. And I feel like as long as we're vigilant about what we're doing, we kind of won't fall into that trap of, creating some type of film about a Slender Man situation where this was birthed from the internet. And now, all these years later, I'm doing a documentary. So I fell for your big trap. I think there's enough people that have seen these things that there's something to it. And just to be analytical about it, a lot of them tend to have the same weird experience after. Some of the ones that I'm pretty solidly thinking that are absolutely true, all describe having the same feeling of dread that starts when they witness it, but kind of escalates after the event. Having to, throw up and becoming nauseated, and that lasting over a period of days is something that multiple people have talked to me about who have no knowledge of each other in any way. And so it's weird. So
I think people are seeing something for definitely. But I was just meaning like with rake. I think the rake itself was what the creepypasta. I try not to even get involved in it. And there's people I was talking to. You get criticized a lot because you're mislabeling things as cryptids. People been labeling Wendigos and skinwalkers and all sorts. They've labeled as cryptids. They're literally attacked for calling them that because that's not what they are. There's a spirits thing. I get it. I'm not a purist though, and if someone mislabels something, I don't give two shits. I'm not going to get all uptight about it. Be like, how dare you not know what the hell you're talking about? I'm not the old cranky old man sitting on my porch with a stick ready to smack somebody for not knowing what the hell they're talking about. Like, does anyone really know? Like, that's the thing. Like, we're all on here. This community will eat you alive because they're very much set in their own ways. And if you don't agree with a certain one, then all of a sudden you're going to be attacked because you don't fall in line with what this person says is the truth. And this is the only way it could be. No one is an expert. I don't give a shit what anyone says. They're not an expert because there's no proof that a lot of these things even exist. Yet people are an expert of something that you can't prove exists. How's that possible? So when someone tells me they're an expert on Bigfoot or a dog man or an alien, how are you an expert? Like, you piqued my interest not because of what you expect. I want to know how you're an expert in that field.
I even feel weird calling myself like a researcher or investigator about these things too. Like, just those are just blanket terms that we use to kind of describe what we're doing. But I feel like even that
I don't label myself as anything besides I'm a guy with a microphone. That's the extent of what I am. I'm a guy with a microphone. I let people talk. I don't go out on investigations. I don't do a whole lot of research. I look on stuff online. I try and research that way. But am I considered a field researcher or anything like that? No.
Yeah, well, we actually, one of the things that have been really exciting about this film division are we're able to do that now. And if anybody's interested in seeing our first one, it is called The Mystery of Kirtland, Ohio. Is it The Curse of Kirtland, Ohio, or The Mystery of Kirtland, Ohio?
Oh boy! Why do we not know this?
Don't know your name of your own.
The mystery. Well, The Mystery of Kirtland, Ohio, and then it's called after that The Melonheads. So really, the documentary is The Melonheads, but we have this tagline with it, and it's on our YouTube channel. And
that was so much fun to film. Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel. It's what is it, like 45, 48 minutes? It's not.
Do you have a cat?
I have 3 dogs.
Okay, I saw something go.
Yeah, it was a dog.
I was like, I'm tripping out over here. I just need something.
It was Lucy. When she comes in enough, it cuts out my background. But yeah,
I was like, I can't be seeing shit right now. I literally just seen something creeping through there.
It's the pale walker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a kid sleepwalking right now that's literally never done that before in his life, and he's just done it twice now in front of me. So it's always weird when those type of like silly kind of crazy things happen when you're talking about this. It always opens these floodgates, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And but so that I stopped being the one that rambles on and on, I wanted to talk about the Melon heads because it's something that we're really proud of with this film division, and it gives JC an opportunity to talk a little more because the idea kind of stemmed from his project that he wanted to do as kind of like a little side thing for our channel, and then we were able to launch this whole extra thing that we do now with these field research investigations. But why don't you go ahead and tell them about the Melon heads?
Yeah, I think it actually kind of launched two separate things, but so I've had this fascination with the melon heads since I was in, I don't know, probably about 8th grade when I first found out about them. It started with like the weirdus.com website where you could go in, you could read like all the different stories from the different states, and for some reason the melon heads always stuck with me. And I spent a lot of time, like, again, on internet researching them and things like that. And there's all the different stories. And there's the Melonheads are not only just associated with Kirtland. There's story of Melonheads from other places. Like there's some in Connecticut, there's some in like Wyoming and stuff like that. But so 2018, all these many years later, an adult, 28 years old, I move out here to the Cleveland area in Northeast Ohio. And months go by, we're doing this podcast and it's like the end of December, and I'm sitting here and one night after we recorded a podcast, I said to Drew, I was like, do you know what's like 5 or 10 minutes away from my house? And he's like, what? And I was like, Kirtland. The Melonheads are literally like a 10-minute drive from my house where they're supposed to be. And I spent all this time, from 2018 until the end of 2023, not even clicking in my head like how close they really were to me. And that's just because like I never leave my house, so I hardly know the area. Like I didn't realize Kirtland. I'd heard of Kirtland, it just never clicked in my head that was the Melonheads. So originally I was just gonna do like a straight facts documentary thing, and then Drew was like, well, what if I come out and we film this thing? And like we filmed this thing in one day. And he comes out here and it's cold and it's raining, but we did something really cool. So we actually found the grave of Dr. Etienne Crow, who was like the main focal point outside of the Melonheads of this story. He's the evil doctor or the benevolent doctor, depending on which story you want to run with. And there were even people online like say that like this dude didn't even really exist. There's no grave. There's, this is all just made up. There is absolutely a grave, and it took us probably, I don't know, how long did we wander around in that graveyard? Probably for about like 2.5 hours.
Just about, yeah, for sure. It was a very large chunk of our shoot in the beginning.
Yeah, and when finally, like we're getting to the point where it's like, man, I don't know if we're gonna find this grave. I hear Drew like 20 feet away from me, like, bro, I found the crow. So that was just like in itself, you get a rush, just like, oh man, we found this grave. Like, even if none of this story is real and the Melonheads aren't true, like we just shoved this in like the internet's face.
What is a Melonhead? Like, what
So
were they supposed to be?
So the Melonheads are humanoid creatures, supposedly of actual children that were experimented on, and they developed hydrocephaly, which is where you get water in your brain, your head swells. So that is a real disease. Now there's a couple different stories. I won't go through them all, so that way I can grift and tell everybody to go watch our documentary on our YouTube channel. But some experimentation was being done on these kids, whether it was by Dr. Crow or through Dr. Crow via the government. And the kids ended up developing this hydrocephaly. And one story, he was like taking care of them. Another story, he was torturing them. And eventually his cabin burns down, which is verified that he had a cabin and it did burn down. And then they just kind of like wandered off in the woods and kept reproducing. And now there's like this group of like these mean melonhead people living out in Kirtland, in and around that area. So that's like the 10,000-foot view of the story of the Melon heads. But that kind of, that sparked our film division. That sparked the Pale Walker that Drew's working on now. But then also I'm doing the Far Out Folklore, which I don't think would have happened if it wasn't for us starting this documentary. Now, these are short videos I'm doing every week. Episode 3 just came out today, and it's just a couple minute video about weird folklore from around the world. So like I've done today's was Hungary. It was the Garabanches of Hungary, which are like kind of like a shaman entity. I did the Mylings of Norway last week, which are like child ghosts that were killed as children or aborted before birth. And then what was my first episode? I don't remember. It was only 3 weeks ago, but like this has now become a passion project of mine, and it's really interesting finding out about like all the different folklore. And I've got so many episodes of this lined up. Like I'm good through the rest of the year. I found so many topics to talk about. Like it's an endless fountain of topics, and it's interesting how many stories each culture shares around the world that like are almost identical. Like stories of giants, stories of like flaming skeletons, stories of like women's spirits in bogs, and that attract men in and then kill them and things like that. Like just all these identical stories that regardless of whether you lived in the mountains or you live next to the sea, you have almost identical tales. So it's been fun. I know we have a lot of other really cool stuff planned, and maybe one day we'll go back out and look for the melon heads again, because we kind of ran out of time and the weather was just getting worse and worse. Because for some reason we decided to do this in January. I don't in Northeast Ohio, like that was dumb. But I mean, it was I don't want to say it was rushed, but like we had from like 1 p.m. till like 7 or 8 p.m. to film this thing. We did it all in that time frame, and that doesn't, and then it's not including like driving around, getting lost, you know um me running over ditches and stuff like that in the car, because my car driving abilities have not progressed since I got my license, according to Andrew.
It's absolutely true.
I'm just an aggressive driver, that's all. Like I see something, I'm running it over. I'm sorry. Like get out of my way, you know. But maybe we'll do like a part 2 that's further investigation, because like there's a whole area in Kirtland that like we didn't have a chance to really check out. And there was like there was those cops there too for some reason, and we just didn't feel like dealing with the police. And
what's really cool is we're doing this, we're just kind of we're minding our own business and making this documentary. And of course we are walking around a graveyard for like 2 hours, so I guess maybe that might have looked a little suspicious to outsiders. But when we found that tombstone, it gave like a rush of adrenaline. Like we're doing something here. Like we actually, something was accomplished. The Wikipedia page to this day, to this moment, says that this guy never really existed. And here we are, we found proof. So, and like if somebody wanted to dispute that we were researchers or investigators or phony filmmakers in any way, like that, to me, like same with the UFO, I had that validation. And as soon as that validation occurred, there was something else that happened too. And there was almost just this ominous feeling that hit. And it wasn't that much longer after we filmed our shot there that we started to say some prayers, and we got out of there and went to go focus on some of the other aspects of the lore that goes with it. But man, it felt like from the moment we were there that there were eyes on us, that we were doing something that someone didn't want us to be doing. And that feeling never went away. It got stranger throughout the night. unfortunately, a lot of the land we intended to go into was posted, so we weren't able to do much there because we need to get permission to go onto that land. But part of the lore is this crybaby bridge, and we were able to go to that bridge. We were able to film around that bridge. We got underneath into the creek side area, and so we didn't have a lot of time. We accomplished a lot with that time, but there was just like some really random strangeness. Like we found some strange prints, and I didn't notice it when I was editing it. It was pointed out to me by somebody who watched it, but there's actually one point. It's so dark. It was the darkest night that I've ever experienced in my entire life. You couldn't see
dark, yeah.
couldn't see your nose. It was that dark.
Yeah, there's one point we're walking and I shut off the flashlight just being a dickhead, while Drew's walking. I had this big like floodlight thing. I shut it off and you just hear like Drew tripping like immediately because you couldn't see anything.
And we're walking and there are a set of eyes that are what I would say melon head height. That I can't remember the exact time it was pointed out to me, but if you pay close attention to when we're walking down the road and find ourselves on the trail that takes us to the creek, on the left side of the road, you can see like a set of eyes that are probably 3-4 feet tall. And it's just super brief. But even right there on that road, there was something. It could have been a possum, but there was something with us right there, right next to us, that we had no idea about because of how completely dark and cold and out of the element we were when we were doing it. If it was a bear, it could have just ate us alive right there on camera.
But 3 or 4 feet would be a pretty big possum.
That's actually, it's not the melonheads you have to worry about in Kirtland, it's the mutant possums.
Yeah, well, that's the reason that we call it the curse of Kirtland, Ohio, or the mystery of Kirtland, Ohio, whichever one we settled on, was because Kirtland, Ohio itself, part of the story that lends it is that Kirtland is cursed, and that started because Joseph Smith actually started the Mormon church there, and they were chased out. And when they were chased out, the rumor is that he cursed the land, and then they eventually found themselves off on the other side, into Utah or wherever they found themselves settling. But in Kirtland,
the first church of Scientology is in Kirtland. It's still, the building is still there. You can go look at it.
There's a giant temple there, and all the way up into the late 80s, early 90s.
Or sorry, not Scientology. What am I saying? Mormon, the Mormon church. I'm sorry, Latter-day Saints.
And the name of this person escapes me right now. It's unfortunate that that's happening, but there was a cult that started in the 80s that was centered around taking over this temple. And I don't believe they were Mormon, but it was definitely like a religious cult. And
Jeffrey Lundgren.
Yeah. And then it led to the murders of 5 people in a standoff with police trying to take over this place. And he went to prison and eventually died in prison. But along with the Melon heads, every so many years, something strange or tragic happens in Kirtland, Ohio. And when we started the project, like JC said multiple times, I don't do anything half-assed. I reached out to every single media outlet from Kirtland to Cleveland. Not a single person got back to me. I emailed the mayor of Kirtland, Ohio. I emailed his staff. Not a single person got back to me. Kirtland, they like to pretend that these things didn't happen, I guess. We asked some people when we were there, kind of man on the street style, what they knew about the history of the town, and nobody had an answer for it. And so it's
poor
like
kid at Sheets had no idea what I was talking about.
Like a weird dairy kind of situation, like from Stephen King's It, where the town itself is kind of in charge and the people that live there are just playing by its rules. And so at some point we are going to go back and revisit Kirtland, and it might not just be Melonhead related, but we're going to analyze this deep history of this cursed area. And one thing that, right after we shot that, I came home and I was hit with like this weird random depression. And I'm kind of noticing a theme here when we do these things. I went out on Saturday and now I'm investigating this crawler creature. And then, not 2 days later, my son is stricken with this terrible emergency. And we just spent 4 days in Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh immediately following it. And causation and correlation are two different things, but I do see correlation in what we're doing and kind of the aftermath and fallout of my life specifically. And so again, that kind of falls into how much do you love this stuff? How much do you believe in it? How much are you willing to put yourself through or your family through so that you can be the guy that can say that where Dr. Etienne Crow is buried? And it's just like a fortitude that we have to carry. And I think in the long run, it's going to pay off and it's going to be worth it. And the risk versus reward. Like I'm willing to go out to these places and face honestly like danger, that can occur out there. I'm not armed with anything, and it doesn't take a cryptid creature to kill you. I'm out in bear country on Saturday looking for these creatures and trying to film and get this story out for people. So again, I tend to ramble and everybody knows it, but I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that Kirtland and its curse doesn't scare me, and we will be back.
I got a cryptic message right after I started this podcast, and I mentioned it several different times, but it said when you start looking into things start looking back. And I was like, okay, whatever. What's that supposed to mean? I've heard that before, and I think it is Nietzsche or whatever, some old, you look into the abyss, so the abyss stares back or some shit like that. Basically, I didn't put much stock into it. Now, I kind of do. So, I do believe that when you start to look into weird topics and start staring into things and looking into stuff, that energy of whatever you're putting into, you're either, I don't want to use the word manifest, but you're doing something to where you're being noticed. So whatever it is out there, supernatural, paranormal, interdimensional, who the hell knows, I do think you're able to make yourself visible to something to see you now too.
Yeah, I'm in that line of thought as well. It's weird how many, instances of just strangeness have occurred since doing the podcast. I had a glitch in the matrix, a couple of weeks ago, and outside of entertainment, I've never bought into that really. JC hates psychics. I hate, hate might not be the right word, but I'm less open to the idea of like the fact that we're in a simulation. As far as I can tell, I'm a flesh and blood person, and I definitely think that space is real and that the earth is round. I don't fall into that line of thinking very often, but sure as shit, I was driving to work one day and I had a glitch in the matrix that shook me so hard that I almost came home and just laid in my bed and questioned reality. But as our friend Ry Voss always says, life has to go on regardless of what's happening. So I took myself to work and I worked through it. But there was a truck in front of me on my way to work, and we're doing 45 miles an hour the whole time, and it's making me late, and I'm aggravated. So I'm paying real close attention to this truck. It has a sticker, and you said that you're a wrestling fan, so you know Chris Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a sticker on the back of this truck that says Jericho, and it's not spelled the same, and I'm not sure what it was advertising. I don't know what the company Jericho is, but I immediately started to think of Chris Jericho on the way to work. And I've seen Fozzy a couple of times, and I've seen him perform with Quarantine, his band that covers Kiss. And so this truck put me through all kinds of mental imagery. And I'm 20 minutes at this point late for work, and I get to a point where this truck can either keep going straight and get out of my way, or it can turn right and stay in my way and make me even later. And I'm just like, oh, please go straight. And he does. And anybody that might be familiar with the area, that he's now heading towards Altoona, and I'm going towards Crescent, and there's not much intersection beyond this point that we're at. And so I start speeding up. I'm going way faster than 45 miles an hour. I'm flipping through the radio, and there's a song that comes on that I have been trying to remember for the longest time. And it's from the band Lorna Shore, and it's The Pain Remains. And I've always really liked the instrumentals of that song and never really paid close attention to any of the vocals. But that song comes on, and I'm like, oh, sick. That's what that song's called. And then I look back up from my radio, and this truck is in front of me again. And it's the same truck, same color, same Jericho sticker. And we're going 45 miles an hour again. And there's, at this point, no possible way that it could have gotten in front of me. He never could have came up from behind and passed me. I was so far ahead at this point. There's no way to turn. There's no road door. He could have made a right turn and found himself in front of me at this point. And it shook me, because I immediately kind of realized that this was some weird glitch in the Matrix situation that happened that I couldn't explain. And so when I got to work, I parked, and I was so taken aback by it. I tried to rationalize it, and I couldn't. And then I look up this song, because that was an anomaly that happened. And this song is literally about being in a false reality, according to the songwriting and an interview that the singer did, where he described that it was, basically a Matrix kind of scenario. So all of those things wrapped up into one crazy couple of minutes for me. And despite the fact that I was late for work, I just sat in my car, and I had to decompress after. And that type of stuff never, I've had experiences my whole life, but in the short period of time that we've been doing this show, it seems to happen more often now.
Do you ever have deja vu?
Every once in a while. I can't really think of an exact example, but I do find myself pretty often thinking that I'm experiencing it, if that makes sense.
I have it a lot, and every time it happens, especially if it's some really creepy deja vu, I get like a nauseous feeling. Like it's kind of, it hits you and you're just like, ugh. I don't know how else to describe it other than like, I've seen this before. And I'm not saying I believe in the simulation theory, but I feel like there is something. Is it an alternate reality, a different universe? Like, we've lived this before. We're crossing over into something that we've done, like the multiverse, whatever you want to call it. Like,
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know how else to describe it. Someone's like, oh, your brain just processes. Like, no, there's certain things I've literally seen it happen. Like, and it happens again, and I'm watching it
100%.
And it's just like, you cannot explain that to anyone unless they experience it themselves too. Like, you can't make anyone understand that when you have deja vu, it's not memories that you're having. Like, you're not having flashbacks or stuff like that. You're literally seeing, like, you're experiencing something again. Like, you've already experienced, you've already seen it, and when it happens, it's just like, oh shit, like I've already
Yep.
seen this
So
before.
yeah, I don't have like the like I said, like I'm super normie, and the paranormal for some reason stays away from me for the most part. But and I think I've said this before on a podcast. I am like the king of deja vu. Like it's at least once a day I'll have something, whether it be work related, something with my dog, something with the TV, and I'll be sitting there, and as soon as that little tract of memory kicks in, where I'm like, I know for a fact that I did this before. Like it's not just me associating like this one event. This is something that has happened and very vividly has happened
Mm-hmm.
because I have a complete memory. It's not just like pieces that I'm putting together, like, oh, this person said this and I did this. It's like this happened verbatim, completely identical before, even though in my lifetime now, it shouldn't have happened before, you know? So
Yeah.
I
I
experienced that a lot, and it's kind of sucks, right? Because like you try so hard to like think about like, okay, what happens next or what happened before that, but you only get like a piece, like a picture
I
of that
just
one moment in time.
I just want to remember have an experience of deja vu right after I win the lottery, so I know which numbers to pick.
That
I
that
don't
would be nice, right?
I don't know why that hasn't happened yet, but I keep trying. Like I keep remembering all this other thing. Why can't I remember becoming a millionaire? Like, come on. So, well, I don't know about you guys, but I think we can probably wrap this one up unless there's something else you want to talk about.
Oh man, we'll talk
Oh
we'll
boy.
talk your head off. We can go for hours. So I think it's okay if you want to go ahead and wrap it up. I just looked at the
Yeah.
clock and realized how late we were going.
Mm.
That's a side effect of talking to me, I guess, because like I said, I'm the guy that when I start getting onto a subject that I like, I just ramble and ramble and ramble.
You
Percy
really,
Gab.
you really remind me of my friend Dustin. Like
Yep.
you guys look similar, and
That's a deja vu moment. I have been told that very thing about somebody named Dustin before.
well,
So that's weird.
no, you look like my friend Dustin. Like so, kind of even have a similar voice. So the whole time we've been talking, I'm just kind of like, this guy looks a lot like Dustin.
What up,
That's wild.
Dustin?
You guys want to let everyone know where they can find you at again? Because I'll keep everything you have. I'll put in the show notes. So just send me an email of whatever links you have, and I'll make sure to add those in the show notes. But for anyone listening, if you want to let them know where they can find you guys up.
Yeah, so we're available pretty much everywhere you can get your podcasts. We are an audio and video medium, so Spotify, Apple, Spreaker are the big audio. We're on YouTube. We're slowly growing our channel. That was one of the challenges early on that kind of brought me down a good bit.
Go check out the Far Out Folklore episodes once a week, Fridays at 12 p.m. They're fun. Like folklore's fun, right?
Yeah, they're solid. They're solid. He's doing a good job, and so you can get that at SasqWatchers Pod as our the name of our channel, and Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I'm on all the socials, and we're just slowly chugging along on all that stuff and building the brand
I have
on
all
the
that stuff, but I don't use it. Like I hate social media. If it wasn't for this podcast, I probably wouldn't even have it anymore.
Yeah, well, what's cool is Twitter. I've always felt that way about Twitter, and um, I don't know if you or any of your listeners are familiar with Mark Bouchard, who did American Movie, which was a documentary in the '90s about making the movie Coven, and he follows us and always shares our stuff, and so
That's
that's
kind of
the
cool.
one really cool thing about social media is we have a Hollywood insider, so to speak, that somehow you know took a liking to us and is incredibly supportive of us on Twitter. So I'm eternally grateful for that.
Yeah, I don't even use the Twitter. I have like I think there's like 9 followers on there. I'm just like, okay, my website literally posts every time I upload a new video. My website automatically posts to Twitter. So that's about the only time the Twitter gets used. I've been using
Yeah.
Facebook more than anything just because that's the main one I have. And then I use Instagram, but there is a TikTok, which I don't want anything to do with TikTok, but I don't make videos or shorts. I made one and that was about the end of it.
Yeah.
So.
I have all kinds of ideas for our TikTok that I just need to have the summer break hit, and we'll start putting some stuff out that I think will get some eyes on it.
Like I said, I hate social media. That's just not my thing. But,
yeah, it's tough.
Well, guys, I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us on.
We'll
really
definitely have
appreciate
to
it.
have you guys back on here soon and dive into more topics.
Yeah, and maybe we can get you on a town hall meeting with us, which is actually
good idea.
We'll promote that real quick too with our town halls every Tuesday. We operate off of Matt Emsch's Planet 412 or 412. If you're not from the Pittsburgh area like myself, and those are every Tuesday, and we're starting to have guests on, and it would be really cool if you joined us.
Yeah, I'd love to. But yeah,
Awesome.
Everyone check out SasqWatchers anywhere where you find Tinfoil Tales. But we're going to wrap this one up. So thanks for listening and thanks for everyone checking out. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Good night. Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.